So now the very important aspect of functions are called function arguments. And function arguments are basically those variables that you pass into a function. For example, in this case, name and MSG are function arguments. Now there are some interesting operations and some interesting ways of processing function arguments. Let's look at an example. So here I've written a function called greet. What it does is it takes two variables or two arguments. The first argument is called name. The second argument is called message. And what it prints is it basically prints. So for example, if I say greet, I give a name, which is Satish, one of our engineers. And if my message was good morning, what it prints for me in this simple, using the simple format statement, it prints hello Satish, good morning. Okay. So that's what this function does. It takes two parameters or two arguments. It takes a name argument and a message argument. Now, since it has two arguments, what if I only pass one argument? It is expected to take two arguments, but imagine if I just say greet Satish, what happens? You will get an error. And what is that error? If you read the error, it says greet missing one required positional argument called message. It says you're missing the message part, and hence I'm raising an error. Okay. Now, one way to get rid of this is by using something called default arguments. Let's understand what a default argument looks like, right? Imagine I'm just changing my definition of this function slightly. What am I doing? I'm keeping the name as is, but message, when I'm declaring my function here, when I'm defining my function, what I'm saying here is the default message. When I give something like this, what it means is that the default message is good morning. Now let's see what happens if I say greet Satish good night. Then what it'll do, it'll use this as name and it'll use this as message and it'll print hello Satish good night. But what happens if you just say greet Satish without the second argument? Here, look here. There is no message argument here. When there is no message argument, the default argument will take the value that is present here, which is good morning, which you are giving when you're declaring or defining your function. So when in this case there is no message argument, so it takes the default value, which is good morning here, and it prints hello Satish good morning. So if you have a variable which is not compulsory, so message here is not mandatory, right? It's not compulsory to be there. Then you can create a default argument. It's good to create a default argument. And here the default argument is message with a value of good morning. Now here comes a tricky thing. There is a small boundary case here. Imagine if I did this. If I said define greet, the first value if I give is the message, is the default value, and this is the non-default value argument. If this is the non-default argument, okay, and if this is the default argument, this is the default. Now if I say greet, if I just call this function as greet Satish, what happens now? It still tries to give the first value here, Satish, to message, and it says there is no value for name. So it's always a good programming practice to avoid syntax errors like this to have non-default arguments before. So this is an error because non-default argument is following a default argument. So as a good programming practice, always have default arguments at the end of your arguments. Right? So just like here, right? Your default argument, you could have multiple arguments here, right? Your default argument should come after your non-default arguments. That's the right programming practice to make the most of your default arguments. Okay. Now comes an other type of arguments. These are very, very interesting. I really like the keyword arguments. Okay, let's understand how the keyword argument works. Okay, so let's see how the function is called first. I'm calling the same function greet, but what I'm passing here is sort of like a dictionary if you want to think about it. Okay, sort of like it. Okay, not exactly a dictionary, but sort of like it. Let's see what I'm saying. I'm saying my name equals to Satish and my message equals to good morning. Okay, so I'm giving a keyword and a value. So these are called keywords and values. Okay, I'm giving a keyword and a value. Okay, I'm saying name equals to Satish, message equals to good morning. Now, and I can give arbitrarily anything. I can give anything that I want here. Now let's see how they're used internally. So now let's look at our function definition. Same greet. Here you have double star keyword args. Okay, so these are called keyword arguments. This is nothing but KW args is to be read as keyword arguments because I'm giving keywords. I'm using keywords to give arguments. Now, if you want to access anything, you can say keyword args name. What it gives you is whatever is the value that you have for name here, it will return that value here. Okay, or keyword args message. So if you've given whatever message, whatever value you gave to the message keyword, you'll get it here. So, and the final result is still the same, right? So if you have a variable list of arguments that you want to pass, right? If you have a variable length of arguments to a function, and if you want to have it free form, see, this makes it much more readable here. Keyword arguments is a way to go. Very, very simple example. Play with this example, modify it so that you understand what's happening. Next comes something called as arbitrary arguments. Okay, wherein you have arbitrary number of arguments. For example, even here, right, my number of arguments is well defined, sort of. Now imagine the other way around. So let's see how the function is called here. Okay, so if you imagine if I say greet and I'm giving 4 arguments, I could have given 5 or 10 or 2 or any number here. Okay, there is no fixed number here. Now if I'm, and it's what it prints for me is hello Sri Satish, hello Murali, hello Naveen, hello Srikant. Let's see how it does it. Now this is where I have my function definition. Here instead of using double star, I'm using a single star and I'm calling it names. Okay, so what happens is all the values that you enter here, this variable length or arbitrary length, this is arbitrary length variables are now input into your function using something called a tuple. You read a structure. So when I say print names, see what I get. When I say print names, I basically get a tuple. This is a tuple, right? Basically get a tuple of all the arguments that I've passed here. And now I can print this by just writing a simple for loop. For name in names, print format name. Right? So what is doing is when I have an arbitrary length of variables, by using this syntax, which is a single stars and variable name, what I'm getting here is I'm taking all of my arguments, arbitrary length arguments, and I'm giving it to the function. I'm giving it to a function as a tuple. And I can do anything with this in the tuple. Not a list, but a tuple, remember. Right? So when you have arbitrary length arguments to pass to functions, you could use this type of hack. And it works very well. Okay. My favorite always has been keyword arguments because it makes a code much more readable for me. Lot of standard libraries use keyword arguments extensively in Python.